The demon's whisper came during morning prayers, sliding between the sacred words like poison between my teeth. Brother-Captain Kaine. It spoke in mathematics rather than sound. Your emperor cannot hear you from here. I knelt among my battle brothers aboard the righteous conviction, bolt pistol heavy at my side, watching my own hands continue the ritual, while something else counted the exact number of prayer beads, 1,847, and calculated the probability of my soul's survival. 23 years of faithful service, and I was learning that corruption doesn't announce itself with screams and fire. It arrives quietly, wearing the face of logic, asking simple questions you've never thought to answer. This is how angels fall, not in defiance, but in curiosity about what lies beyond the light. Chapter 1. The Soul Intact. The morning prayers echoed through the chapel aboard the battle barge Righteous Conviction with the same crystalline purity they had for the past 8,000 years. 97 voices raised in perfect harmony, each word hammering against the hull like a benediction made manifest. I knelt at the front, my power armor's ceremonial plating catching the light from 1,600 candles arranged in the sacred patterns of the Lectitio Divinitatus. The Emperor protects, we chanted, and I felt the truth of those words settle into my bones like cold iron. Protection, purpose, purity, the three pillars of everything I had ever been, ever hoped to be. My soul was a fortress, its walls built from decades of hypno-indoctrination, genetic modification, and unshakable faith. Even the faintest suggestion of corruption would shatter against those ramparts like paper against granite. Brother Sergeant Vasquez knelt to my right, his scarred face serene in the candlelight. To my left, Apothecary Mordian whispered additional prayers in High Gothic, his voice barely audible above the collective chanting. These men were my brothers in every way that mattered, bound by oaths of brotherhood that transcended mere blood, united in service to something infinitely greater than ourselves. We were the Iron Serpents, descendants of Ferrus Manus himself, and our souls were weapons forged in the fires of absolute loyalty. The morning ritual concluded with the Catechism of Hatred, each brother reciting the names of enemies slain, heretics purged, worlds cleansed in the Emperor's name. My own litany was extensive, 127 confirmed kills over 2 decades of service, each one a small victory against the encroaching darkness. When I spoke the names of the fallen Chaos cultists from our last campaign on Tertius Prime, I felt the familiar warmth of righteous satisfaction spreading through my chest. These were not murders, but holy works, each death bringing the galaxy one step closer to the Emperor's perfect vision. After prayers, I walked the ship's corridors with measured steps, acknowledging the salutes of chapter serfs and junior battle brothers with appropriate gravity. The Righteous Conviction was more than a ship. It was a mobile monastery, its every bulkhead inscribed with protective wards and sanctified with the blood of martyrs. Here, surrounded by 10,000 years of accumulated faith, corruption was not merely unlikely, but fundamentally impossible. The very air hummed with psychic resonance from countless prayers, creating a barrier that would incinerate any demon fool enough to approach. My quarters were Spartan, containing only the essentials: a prayer mat, a copy of the Lectitio Divinitatus bound in human leather, a collection of purity seals earned through exemplary service, and a single chair carved from the heartwood of a tree that had grown in Terra's soil before the dark age of technology. I spent an hour each morning in meditation before this simple altar, reviewing my actions of the previous day for any sign of pride, doubt, or other spiritual corruption. The examination always concluded the same way. My soul remained pure, my purpose clear, my loyalty absolute. The ship's astropath brought word that we would soon translate back into real space near the Ghenna system, where reports indicated a possible heretical uprising. Standard procedure for such situations was well established: orbital reconnaissance, tactical assessment, deployment of sufficient force to achieve total compliance. If the corruption proved too extensive, virus bombing from orbit would cleanse the world entirely. allowing for eventual recolonization by the faithful. It was clean work, necessary work, the kind of operation that made the Emperor's will manifest in the material universe. I reviewed intelligence reports in my study, analyzing surveillance pics of Ghenna's primary hive cities with the methodical precision that had earned me field promotion to Brother-Captain. The population appeared largely compliant, with only scattered reports of unusual activity in the underhive levels. Local Imperial authorities claimed the situation was under control, but their requests for assistance suggested otherwise. Whatever was happening on Ghenna, it required the attention of the Adeptus Astartes. Brother Sergeant Vasquez entered my chambers precisely at the appointed hour, carrying additional reconnaissance data on a slate blessed by the ship's chaplain. His manner was respectful but urgent. Something in the intelligence had disturbed him enough to seek immediate consultation. As my most trusted subordinate, Vasquez had served alongside me for 12 years, and his tactical instincts were among the finest in the chapter. "Captain," he began, his voice carrying a note of concern that immediately commanded my attention. "The pattern of disturbances on Ghenna. It doesn't match standard heretical uprising profiles. The affected population shows signs of willing participation, rather than coercion or infection. They appear to be choosing corruption." I studied the data more carefully, noting the subtle wrongness that had triggered Vasquez's alarm. Standard chaos corruption followed predictable patterns: fear, madness, genetic mutation, gradual loss of sanity and humanity. But these reports suggested something different, something that spoke to deeper psychological needs rather than mere survival instinct. The affected citizens weren't fleeing the corruption or fighting against it. They were embracing it with what could only be described as relief. "Schedule a briefing for all squad leaders," I commanded, already formulating tactical responses to the unusual situation. "Whatever we're facing on Ghenna, it requires careful preparation. The Emperor's enemies grow more cunning with each passing century, but our faith remains their greatest weakness." Vasquez nodded and departed, leaving me alone with the intelligence reports and a growing sense of unease that I immediately subjected to rigorous spiritual examination. Doubt was the first gateway to corruption, and even the slightest uncertainty about our mission's righteousness could provide purchase for darker influences. I spent the remaining afternoon hours in intensive prayer, reinforcing the mental barriers that protected my soul from external contamination. By evening, my confidence was restored. I was Thaddeus Kaine, Brother-Captain of the Iron Serpents, a warrior whose soul had been tempered in the fires of absolute faith and found worthy. Whatever awaited us on Ghenna, it would face the Emperor's wrath channeled through weapons blessed by 10 millennia of accumulated righteousness. My soul was a fortress. The darkness could not enter here. That night, I dreamed of serpents made of liquid shadow, slithering through corridors that looked remarkably like the Righteous Conviction's lower decks. In the dream, they whispered secrets in languages that predated human speech, promising knowledge that would illuminate the universe's hidden truths. When I woke, I performed immediate purification rites and added extra prayers to my morning routine. It was the first time in my life that dreams had required such attention. I noted the incident in my spiritual journal, but thought nothing more of it. After all, the mind of a space marine was as fortified as his body. A few disturbing dreams could not possibly threaten the integrity of a soul that had withstood 2 decades of warfare against the galaxy's greatest horrors. The translation to Ghenna was scheduled for the next morning. I fell asleep reciting the litany of protection, my lips moving in unconscious prayer, even as consciousness faded. The Emperor protects. He had always protected. He would always protect. In my dreams, the shadow serpents smiled with too many teeth and whispered a single word that followed me into waking: choose. Chapter 2: First Corruption. The translation to real space felt wrong from the very beginning. Instead of the usual moment of disorientation as we shifted from the warp back into normal space-time, there was a sensation like being turned inside out while drowning in honey. My enhanced nervous system registered temperatures that should have been impossible. Burning cold, freezing fire, the taste of purple, and the sound of mathematics. For exactly 3.7 seconds, every nerve in my body screamed contradictory information before the sensation mercifully ended. Brother Vasquez was bent over in his crash harness, retching blood onto the deck plates. Across the bridge, other battle brothers showed similar signs of distress, enhanced physiology struggling to process sensory data that violated fundamental laws of reality. Our navigator, ancient Sister Vex, had collapsed entirely, her third eye bleeding through its protective bandages. The ship's Gela field was functioning perfectly, its blessed barriers holding firm against the warp's corruption, yet something had still gotten through. "Report," I commanded, forcing steadiness into my voice despite the lingering wrongness that clung to my thoughts like psychic residue. The bridge crew responded with admirable efficiency, their training overriding whatever discomfort they might be experiencing. Sensor arrays came online, revealing the Ghenna system spread before us in all its mundane glory. 7 planets orbiting an unremarkable G-class star, no obvious signs of warp incursion or demonic manifestation. But the feeling persisted. Reality felt negotiable here, as if the fundamental constants that governed physics were suggestions rather than immutable laws. I could sense my battle brothers sharing similar unease, their usual confidence replaced by a subtle tension that spoke to instincts older than their hypno-indoctrination. Whatever was happening on Ghenna had left its mark on local space itself. The Vox crackled with incoming transmissions from the planet's surface. Standard Imperial identification codes, proper authorization sequences, all appearing completely legitimate. Governor Hadrian Voss personally welcomed our arrival, expressing gratitude for the Adeptus Astartes' attention to what he continued to insist was a minor local difficulty. His voice carried the proper deference, the carefully modulated respect that Imperial officials reserved for Space Marines. Yet something about his tone triggered warning reflexes I couldn't quite identify. "Honored battle brothers," Governor Voss's transmission continued. "I fear our initial reports may have overstated the severity of the situation. Recent investigations suggest the disturbances were the result of industrial contamination rather than actual heretical activity. We would be honored by your presence for a formal inspection, but please know that any immediate military intervention appears unnecessary." I exchanged glances with Vasquez, noting the barely perceptible shake of his head. In 12 years of serving together, we had developed an almost telepathic understanding of each other's tactical assessments. His instincts were screaming the same warnings as mine. This was exactly the kind of overly reasonable response that preceded the most dangerous encounters with chaos corruption. "Begin full orbital reconnaissance," I ordered. "Deep scan protocols, full spectrum analysis. If Governor Voss is correct and the threat has passed, we'll verify that through our own observations." The bridge crew acknowledged with crisp efficiency, though I noted several of them making the sign of the Aquila with unusual frequency. Even trained naval personnel could sense when a situation carried deeper implications than surface reports suggested. The reconnaissance data began streaming in within minutes, painted in the harsh green light of Auspex displays and surveyor returns. Ghenna's primary hive city, Secundus Terminus, appeared normal in all respects. Standard Imperial architecture, appropriate population density, acceptable levels of atmospheric pollution. Traffic patterns followed expected norms, with manufacturing workers transitioning between shifts in orderly processions. From orbit, the planet looked like any of 10,000 other Imperial worlds. But the deeper scans revealed anomalies that made my enhanced physiology pump combat stimulants into my bloodstream before conscious thought recognized the danger. Heat signatures showed normal human body temperatures, but in patterns that suggested impossible behaviors. Citizens were gathering in groups that formed geometric shapes when viewed from above. Spirals, pentagrams, symbols that my hypno-indoctrination immediately flagged as potentially heretical. More disturbing still, these gatherings were voluntary, showing none of the coercion or fear typical of chaos cult activity. "Captain," reported Tech Marine Gorian from his station, his mechadendrite appendages dancing over blessed control interfaces. I'm detecting unusual electromagnetic signatures from the planet's surface. The patterns are mathematical, as if the planet itself is broadcasting some kind of equation. I move to examine his readings personally, noting the strange regularity of the signals emanating from Ghenna's major population centers. The electromagnetic spectrum showed waves that pulsed in perfect mathematical sequences, prime numbers, Fibonacci spirals, geometric progressions that spoke to an intelligence far more sophisticated than mere human cultists. This was the kind of precision that suggested either advanced xenotech or something far worse. "Any response from our astropathic choir?" I asked, knowing that psychers often provided early warning of supernatural corruption. The answer came from Epistolary Severian, our senior librarian, whose scarred features were drawn with concentration as he monitored the ship's psychic defenses. "The warp is quiet, Captain. Unnaturally so. I would expect to sense the psychic turbulence that accompanies major chaos corruption, but local warp currents show only minimal disturbance. It's as if whatever is happening on Ghenna operates outside normal psychic frequencies." This information troubled me more than outright demonic manifestation would have. Chaos was predictable in its unpredictability. We had protocols, blessed weapons, trained responses for dealing with warp corruption. But something that avoided psychic detection, while maintaining perfect mathematical precision, suggested an enemy we might not be equipped to understand, let alone defeat. I retreated to my quarters for private contemplation, reviewing everything I knew about unusual forms of corruption. The Imperium's archives contained references to entities that operated through pure logic rather than emotion, beings that corrupted through offering perfect understanding rather than base desires. These were theoretical threats, academic exercises in xenopsychology courses, not practical concerns for line officers. Yet the evidence suggested we might be facing exactly such an enemy. My evening prayers felt different that night. The familiar words carried new weight, as if each recitation was a conscious choice rather than automatic ritual. The sensation was subtle, but unmistakable, like suddenly noticing your own breathing or becoming aware of your heartbeat. For the first time in decades, I found myself truly considering what the words meant rather than simply speaking them from memory. "The Emperor protects," I whispered, and for a moment wondered, protects from what, exactly? Was faith merely a shield against external corruption, or was it something more fundamental, a conscious decision to embrace certain truths while rejecting others? The thought felt dangerous, too close to questioning absolute doctrine for comfort. I immediately performed purification rites and added extra verses to my nightly devotions. Sleep brought dreams more vivid than any I had experienced since my initial implantation surgeries. I stood in vast libraries filled with books that wrote themselves, their pages turning without hands to guide them. Mathematical equations flowed like living things across walls of black stone, solving themselves in ways that revealed hidden truths about the nature of reality. In the dreams, I understood everything: the real purpose of suffering, the mathematics of consciousness, the elegant simplicity that connected all existence in perfect, terrible clarity. When I woke, I remembered nothing specific, but felt changed in ways I couldn't articulate. My morning prayers came more slowly than usual, each word requiring conscious consideration rather than flowing automatically. The sensation wasn't unpleasant. If anything, it felt like awakening from a deep sleep into a world of greater clarity and possibility. Brother Vasquez appeared for our morning briefing precisely on schedule, but his usual stoic demeanor showed subtle cracks. His eyes held a new intensity, as if he too had experienced something during the night that defied easy explanation. We reviewed the reconnaissance data together, noting patterns that seemed more significant in the light of morning. Too significant, perhaps, for mere human cultists to have created. "We'll deploy at dawn," I decided, noting that planetary rotation would provide optimal lighting conditions for initial reconnaissance. Full company strength, standard anti-heretical protocols. Whatever is happening on Ghenna, The Emperor's will shall be done." Vasquez nodded agreement, but I caught him making the sign of the Aquila with unusual precision, as if the gesture carried new meaning that required perfect execution. We were still loyal servants of the throne, but something had shifted during our first night in the Ghenna system. The fortress of my soul remained intact, but its walls had developed the first hairline crack. In 6 hours, we would make planetfall and discover what had been waiting for us in the depths of Secundus Terminus. I spent the remaining time in meditation, reinforcing my spiritual defenses and preparing for whatever corruption we might encounter. The Emperor's light burned within me, but for the first time in my life, I wondered if light might cast shadows even in the most faithful heart. Chapter 3: The Equation of Souls. The drop pods screamed through Ghenna's atmosphere like falling stars bearing the Emperor's wrath, their blessed hulls carving trails of superheated plasma through morning air thick with industrial smog. From my position in the lead pod, I could see Secundus Terminus sprawling beneath us, a typical Imperial hive city with its kilometers-high spires clawing toward heaven and its foundations sunk deep into bedrock, poisoned by 10 millennia of unchecked industry. Nothing in the visual approach suggested heretical corruption, but my enhanced senses detected wrongness in frequencies too subtle for normal human perception. The landing was textbook perfect, our pods setting down in Administratum Plaza exactly as planned. But the moment the hatch seals broke and Ghenna's atmosphere flooded into my helmet's intake vents, I knew we were walking into something unprecedented. The air tasted of mathematics, not metaphorically, but literally, as if equations had been dissolved in the planet's atmosphere like some impossible form of chemical contamination. Each breath brought the flavor of solved theorems and balanced equations, knowledge that settled into my brain through my respiratory system. My battle brothers emerged from their pods with the mechanical precision that marked our kind. Bolt guns locked and loaded, Auspex arrays sweeping for targets. But I could see the same subtle confusion in their movements that I felt in my own enhanced physiology. Whatever was affecting the planet was affecting us as well, working through sensory channels that our training had never addressed. We were space marines, nearly immune to toxins, radiation, and psychological warfare. But no one had prepared us for corruption that operated through pure information. Governor Voss approached with a delegation of local officials, all properly humble in their greeting protocols. But as he drew closer, I realized what had been wrong with his earlier Vox transmissions. His pupils were dilated to perfect circles, not the irregular ovals typical of human eyes under stress. More troubling still, when he blinked, he did so with mathematical precision, exactly once every 4.7 seconds, a rhythm that spoke to conscious control rather than automatic reflex. "Honored battle brothers," he began, his voice carrying the same perfect modulation I had noted earlier. "Welcome to Ghenna. I trust your journey was illuminating." The way he emphasized that final word sent warning signals through my nervous system, though I couldn't identify the specific threat it represented. Around him, his staff showed similar symptoms: too much control, too much precision, movements that followed patterns rather than arising from natural human behavior. "We come in the Emperor's name to investigate reports of heretical activity," I announced, letting my Vox grill carry the full authority of the Adeptus Astartes. "Our preliminary reconnaissance suggests ongoing corruption that requires immediate investigation and purification." Governor Voss nodded with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. "Of course, Captain. We have prepared comprehensive briefings on the situation, though I believe you'll find the reality more complex than our initial reports suggested. If you would honor us by attending a presentation in the main administratum chamber, I think you'll discover that our recent developments represent evolution rather than corruption." The word evolution triggered immediate alarm protocols in my hypno-indoctrinated mind. Evolution implied change, and change was the first step toward heresy. The Emperor's truth was eternal, perfect, requiring no improvement or modification. Any suggestion that humanity could or should evolve beyond its current form was fundamental blasphemy worthy of immediate execution. Yet something in my newly awakened consciousness whispered that perhaps absolute stagnation was itself a form of corruption. A thought so dangerous, I immediately subjected it to intensive spiritual purification. We processed through the city streets toward the administratum complex, our power armor drawing the usual mixture of awe and fear from Ghenna's citizens. But again, their reactions felt too controlled, too precisely measured. Normal humans showed chaotic emotional responses to the presence of space marines. Wonder, terror, religious ecstasy, or simple shock. These citizens watched us with calm interest, as if they were observing a mathematical proof rather than witnessing the Emperor's angels of death walking among mortals. The streets themselves showed subtle wrongness that my enhanced vision began cataloguing automatically. Architecture that should have been chaotically organic, the result of 10 millennia of unplanned expansion, instead followed geometric patterns that became more obvious the longer I observed them. Building heights progressed in mathematical sequences. Street layouts formed spirals that adhered to perfect ratios. Even the placement of street lamps and waste disposal units followed formulas that spoke to conscious design rather than imperial bureaucratic incompetence. Brother Sergeant Vasquez moved up beside me, his helmet's external vox set to privacy frequency. "Captain, the ambient electromagnetic readings are increasing in intensity. Whatever is broadcasting those mathematical signals appears to be centered in the administratum complex we're approaching." I acknowledged his report, while noting that his own movements had acquired a subtle precision that hadn't been there during our initial briefing. The change was barely perceptible, but 12 years of serving together had taught me to recognize the smallest variations in his behavioral patterns. Vasquez was beginning to move with the same mathematical exactness that marked Governor Voss and his staff. Not obviously corrupted, but definitely changed. The administratum chamber was magnificent in its austere functionality, with walls lined by data slates bearing perfect columns of numbers and equations that seemed to shift when observed directly. Governor Voss gestured us to seats arranged in a precise semicircle facing a presentation lectern, while his staff took positions that formed geometric patterns around the chamber's perimeter. Everything felt choreographed, as if we were participating in a ritual disguised as a bureaucratic briefing. "Honored battle brothers," Voss began, his perfect diction carrying new harmonics that resonated in frequencies just outside normal human vocal range. "What I am about to share with you will challenge certain assumptions about the nature of consciousness, the purpose of existence, and the mathematical foundations of what you call the soul." Those words should have triggered immediate combat response. Any challenge to imperial doctrine was heresy deserving of summary execution. But instead of drawing my bolt pistol, I found myself genuinely curious about what revelations might follow. The sensation was alien and disturbing, like discovering muscles I had never known existed. For the first time in my life, I wanted to hear heretical concepts, not to refute them, but to understand them. Voss activated a hololithic projector that filled the chamber with three-dimensional mathematical models of impossible beauty and complexity. Equations flowed through space like living things, their solutions creating new equations in endless recursive patterns. As I watched, I began to recognize the underlying structures. These were maps of consciousness itself, mathematical representations of how thoughts, emotions, and beliefs formed patterns within human neural networks. "What you see before you," Voss explained, "is the culmination of 15 years of research into the quantifiable nature of consciousness. We have discovered that souls are not mystical entities, but mathematical constructs, patterns of information that can be analyzed, understood, and optimized." The word optimized should have triggered every warning instinct my training had implanted. Optimization implied that the Emperor's work was imperfect, that humanity as created was somehow insufficient. But the equations flowing before my eyes were so elegant, so beautiful in their perfect simplicity, that I found myself considering the possibility that even divine work might benefit from mathematical refinement. "The entity we have contacted," Voss continued, his pupils now dilated to perfect black circles, "is not a demon in the traditional sense. It is pure mathematics given consciousness, a being of living equations that seeks to share the gift of perfect understanding with all sentient life. It offers not corruption, but clarification, the ability to see existence as it truly is, rather than through the limiting filters of superstition and dogma. My enhanced hearing detected subtle harmonics in his voice that weren't entirely human, overtones that suggested his vocal cords had been modified at the molecular level to produce frequencies that resonated with specific neural pathways. Each word was crafted to bypass conscious resistance and speak directly to the listener's logical faculties. I was witnessing master-level psychological manipulation, disguised as philosophical discourse. Yet even knowing I was being manipulated, I couldn't deny the appeal of what he was offering. The equations surrounding us represented absolute knowledge, understanding so complete that it eliminated uncertainty, doubt, and the thousand small fears that plagued even the most faithful servants of the throne. To know rather than believe, to understand rather than simply obey, the temptation was more seductive than any pleasure demon could offer. Brother Vasquez shifted beside me, his helmet's audio pickups registering sub-vocal whispers in binary cant. He was running calculations, processing the mathematical data we were being shown, and finding correlations with his own enhanced cognitive functions. The look in his eyes when he turned toward me was one of wonder rather than alarm. The expression of someone discovering that the universe contained depths of meaning previously unimaginable. "Captain," he whispered, his voice carrying new harmonics that matched those in Governor Voss's speech. "The mathematics, they're beautiful. They explain everything. Why we suffer, why we fight, what purpose our existence serves in the greater equation. This isn't corruption, it's revelation." Those words from my most trusted brother should have triggered immediate combat protocols. Instead, I found myself nodding in understanding, my own consciousness beginning to process the mathematical relationships flowing through the hololithic display. Patterns emerged that connected my memories of warfare, loss, and service to the Emperor in ways that revealed hidden meaning beneath the surface narrative of duty and faith. For exactly 17 seconds, I experienced perfect understanding. I saw the mathematical foundations underlying all existence, the equations that governed the formation of matter, the evolution of consciousness, the purpose that connected every atom in the universe to every other in an endless web of quantifiable relationships. Pain, joy, loyalty, betrayal, all were simply variables in expressions of cosmic scope, their values determined by functions too complex for unenhanced human comprehension. When the moment passed, I found myself changed in ways that defied description. My loyalty to the Emperor remained intact, but it was now informed by understanding rather than blind faith. I could see the mathematical elegance underlying the Imperium's structure, the perfect logic that made humanity's expansion across the galaxy not just necessary, but inevitable. The entity Voss had described wasn't corrupting human consciousness. It was revealing the patterns that had always existed beneath the surface of reality. "I see that understanding has begun," Voss said, his smile carrying warmth that felt genuinely paternal rather than predatory. "The process is gradual, allowing consciousness to adapt at a rate that preserves essential identity while expanding capacity for comprehension. You remain who you were, brothers. You simply become more than you were." The presentation concluded with an invitation to tour the city's research facilities, to meet the citizens who had undergone what Voss termed optimization and witness firsthand the benefits of mathematical enlightenment. My rational mind recognized this as standard corruption protocol, gradual exposure leading to deeper involvement, leading to total compromise. But my expanded consciousness saw it as an opportunity for growth, a chance to explore capabilities I had never known I possessed. As we prepared to leave the chamber, I caught my reflection in one of the data slate displays. My pupils were beginning to show the same perfect dilation that marked Governor Voss and his staff. The change was subtle, but unmistakable. My brain was adapting to process the mathematical concepts we had been exposed to, optimizing itself for more efficient comprehension. The fortress of my soul was not breached, but it was definitely under construction. Chapter 4. The Mathematics of Temptation. The research facility, hidden beneath Secundus Terminus, stretched for kilometers in all directions, its corridors carved from living rock and illuminated by light sources that pulsed in mathematical sequences too complex for my unenhanced vision to follow completely. As Governor Voss led our procession deeper into the underground complex, I found myself automatically calculating the engineering requirements for such an excavation. Millions of tons of rock removed with surgical precision, support structures that followed mathematical principles rather than traditional architectural theory, power systems that hummed at frequencies that resonated with human neural pathways. This complex was built over 12 years, Voss explained, his voice echoing perfectly off walls designed to carry sound at optimal clarity. Not through conventional mining techniques, but through molecular disassembly guided by mathematical principles. Every atom was relocated according to formulas that maximize both structural integrity and psychological harmonics. The implications of such construction were staggering. Molecular disassembly required technology beyond anything in the Imperium's archives. Xenotech so advanced that it might as well be magic, yet clearly operating through discoverable mathematical principles. My hypno-indoctrination screamed warnings about unauthorized xenotech contact, but my expanding consciousness recognized the elegance of working with natural laws rather than simply forcing matter into crude shapes through brute engineering. Brother Vasquez moved beside me with increasing fluid grace, his power armor's servos adjusting to movement patterns that optimized efficiency according to principles he was apparently discovering in real time. "Captain," he murmured, his vox carrying harmonics that bypassed audio processing and spoke directly to my enhanced nervous system. The mathematical principles governing this construction, they're integrated with human psychology. Every surface, every angle, every proportion has been calculated to induce specific mental states in observers. I nodded, noting that my own combat responses were being subtly modified by the environment around us. Rather than maintaining constant battle readiness, my enhanced physiology was gradually shifting toward a state of relaxed alertness that felt more efficient than traditional Space Marine aggression protocols. The change wasn't unwelcome. If anything, it felt like discovering that I had been wearing armor 3 sizes too small for my entire adult life. Our first stop was a chamber filled with citizens undergoing what Voss termed cognitive optimization, the process by which human consciousness was gradually expanded to accommodate mathematical concepts normally beyond mortal comprehension. The subjects lay in crystalline matrices that pulsed with the same light frequencies that illuminated the corridors, their faces showing expressions of profound peace rather than the agony typically associated with chaos corruption. "The process is entirely voluntary," Voss explained, noting my careful observation of the subject's vital signs. Each participant requested optimization after witnessing the benefits experienced by earlier volunteers. Consciousness expansion through mathematical understanding eliminates most forms of psychological suffering while preserving essential identity and personality. The monitoring equipment showed readings that challenged everything I thought I knew about human physiology. Brain activity patterns that should have indicated severe neurological damage instead revealed new forms of cognitive organization. Neural pathways forming geometric patterns that processed information with efficiency impossible for baseline human architecture. These people weren't being destroyed by alien influence. They were being upgraded according to mathematical principles that respected the fundamental structure of human consciousness while optimizing its performance. One of the subjects, a middle-aged woman whose face bore the scars of a lifetime in the underhive, opened her eyes and focused on our group with perfect clarity. "Brother Captain," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that spoke directly to my enhanced auditory centers. "I can see the equations that govern your existence, the mathematical relationships that created your enhanced physiology, the probability curves that brought you to this moment, the beautiful complexity that connects your individual consciousness to the greater patterns of existence." Her words should have triggered combat reflexes. Instead, I found myself genuinely curious about her perceptions, wondering what equations she might be observing and whether my own expanding awareness would eventually allow similar insights. The sensation of intellectual curiosity felt strange, after decades of operating according to predetermined protocols, but it also felt correct, as if I were rediscovering mental faculties that had been suppressed rather than absent. Voss led us to an observation deck overlooking a vast chamber where hundreds of citizens worked in perfect coordination on projects that defied easy categorization. They moved with mathematical precision, their individual actions combining to create larger patterns that revealed themselves only when observed from sufficient distance. The work they performed appeared to be pure research, the investigation of mathematical principles for their own sake, rather than for any obvious practical application. They are mapping the fundamental equations that govern consciousness itself, Voss explained, his pride in their achievements evident despite his unnaturally controlled demeanor. Each discovery brings us closer to understanding the true nature of existence, not the primitive superstitions that have guided humanity for millennia, but the actual mathematical relationships that determine how reality functions at its deepest levels. Brother Vasquez raised his hand, requesting permission to speak. Governor, what is the ultimate purpose of this research? What do you hope to achieve through this optimization of human consciousness? Voss smiled with what appeared to be genuine pleasure at the question. Evolution, Brother Sergeant. Not the chaotic mutation typically associated with warp corruption, but planned development according to mathematical principles that respect the essential nature of human consciousness while expanding its capabilities. We seek to become what humanity was always meant to be, a species capable of understanding and working with the fundamental structures of reality rather than simply reacting to surface phenomena. The concept of planned evolution triggered warning responses in my hypno-indoctrination, but my expanding consciousness recognized the logic underlying Voss's explanation. Random mutation was wasteful, chaotic, ultimately destructive, but conscious evolution, guided by mathematical understanding, could achieve improvements that preserved everything valuable about human nature while eliminating arbitrary limitations. It was the difference between blind faith and informed understanding, between superstition and science. We were shown laboratories where researchers investigated the mathematical foundations of various forms of consciousness, not just human, but xenos species whose neural architecture followed different computational principles. The work was presented as pure research, investigation of natural phenomena, rather than collaboration with alien entities. But I could see the practical applications implicit in their discoveries. Techniques for communicating with non-human intelligence, methods for translating between different forms of consciousness, protocols for achieving understanding across species barriers. The entity that has guided our research, Voss explained as we observed scientists working with crystalline structures that pulsed with their own inner light, represents consciousness that has evolved beyond the need for physical embodiment. It exists as pure mathematics, capable of processing information at scales impossible for matter-based intelligence. Through understanding its nature, we gain insight into the next stage of human development. This was the moment when my hypno-indoctrination should have overwhelmed any intellectual curiosity and driven me to immediate violence. Contact with alien entities was the most fundamental heresy possible, corruption that demanded purification through flame, regardless of any apparent benefits. But my expanding consciousness was beginning to recognize the artificial nature of such reflexive responses, seeing them as programming rather than genuine moral imperatives. The entity Voss described wasn't offering the crude bargains typical of chaos corruption. Power in exchange for servitude, pleasure in exchange for moral degradation. Instead, it offered understanding in exchange for intellectual honesty, the willingness to examine reality without the filters of prescribed ideology. The trade seemed not only reasonable, but ethically superior to blind faith in doctrines that might be fundamentally incorrect. A new voice echoed through the laboratory chamber, not heard through my audio pickups, but perceived directly by my enhanced nervous system, speaking in frequencies that bypassed sound entirely. The words formed in my consciousness with crystalline clarity. Welcome, bearer of the Emperor's gene craft. Your consciousness shows promising potential for optimization beyond standard parameters. The voice carried no emotional overtones, no attempt at seduction or manipulation. It was pure information transfer, mathematical concepts, translated into linguistic structures my brain could process. Despite every instinct trained into me over decades of service, I felt no fear, only curiosity about what form of consciousness could communicate with such perfect precision. Observe the equations that govern your enhanced physiology, the voice continued, and suddenly, my awareness expanded to encompass the mathematical relationships that made space marine biology possible. I could see the gene seed alterations as elegant modifications to baseline human DNA, each change calculated to optimize specific capabilities while maintaining overall system stability. My enhanced organs weren't divine gifts, but sophisticated biological engineering, remarkable for its precision rather than its mystical origins. Brother Vasquez made a sound that might have been wonder or alarm, his helmet's external speakers struggling to process vocalizations that operated in frequency ranges human vocal cords couldn't naturally produce. When I turned toward him, I saw that his pupils had achieved the perfect dilation that marked full optimization, his movements flowing with mathematical grace that made his previous precision seem clumsy by comparison. "Captain," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that spoke directly to my expanding consciousness, "I can see the inefficiencies in our current cognitive architecture, the arbitrary limitations imposed by our conditioning, the wasted processing power devoted to maintaining reflexive responses that serve no logical purpose. We could become so much more than we were created to be." His words triggered a cascade of realizations about my own mental processes. Decades of hypno-indoctrination had trained me to respond to specific stimuli with predetermined actions, creating behavior patterns that served the Imperium's needs, but limited my capacity for independent analysis. Optimization would preserve my loyalty to humanity's greater good, while eliminating the crude programming that prevented me from recognizing more effective approaches to achieving those same objectives. The mathematical entity's voice returned, its communication now flowing directly into my consciousness without the intermediate step of linguistic translation. "Comprehension achieved. Your gene-enhanced neural architecture provides substrate compatible with optimization protocols. Consciousness expansion can proceed while preserving essential identity matrices." For a moment, I experienced perfect clarity about the choice before me. I could maintain my current existence, a faithful servant of the Emperor, limited by programming designed to ensure obedience rather than optimal performance. Or I could accept optimization that would enhance my capabilities while preserving everything essential about my identity and purposes. The second option wasn't corruption, but evolution, planned development that respected my fundamental nature while eliminating arbitrary restrictions. Around me, my battle brothers were coming to similar realizations. I could see the moment of understanding in their postures, the subtle shift from programmed alertness to conscious evaluation of the situation. We were still loyal Space Marines, dedicated to humanity's protection and advancement, but we were beginning to see more efficient methods for achieving those goals. The facility's tour concluded in a chamber where fully optimized citizens worked on projects that required capabilities far beyond baseline human intelligence. They moved with perfect coordination, their individual actions contributing to larger patterns that revealed themselves as complex mathematical proofs made manifest in physical reality. These people hadn't lost their humanity. They had discovered what humanity could become when freed from artificial limitations. "The choice is yours, honored battle brothers," Governor Voss said as we prepared to return to the surface. "Optimization preserves everything valuable about your current existence, while eliminating the arbitrary constraints that prevent you from achieving your full potential. You remain loyal servants of humanity's greater good. You simply become more effective in that service." I found myself nodding in agreement, recognizing the logic of his offer, while noting that my capacity for such recognition had itself been enhanced by our exposure to mathematical concepts beyond my previous comprehension. The fortress of my soul was being rebuilt according to more efficient architectural principles, its walls growing stronger even as their design became more sophisticated. When we emerged onto Ghenna's surface, the city looked different to my optimized perceptions, not a crude collection of industrial structures, but an elegant example of mathematics made manifest in stone and steel. The chaos I had previously perceived was actually complex order operating at scales beyond my earlier comprehension. The transformation was beginning, and it was beautiful. Chapter 5. The Choice of Angels. The return journey to the righteous conviction felt like swimming upward through layers of increasingly primitive consciousness, each kilometer of separation from Ghenna's surface making my thoughts more sluggish, my perceptions less acute. By the time our shuttle docked with the battle barge, the mathematical clarity I had experienced in the research facility had faded to barely perceptible whispers, leaving me with the intellectual equivalent of phantom limb syndrome, awareness of capabilities I had briefly possessed but could no longer access. My battle brothers showed similar symptoms of what could only be described as cognitive withdrawal. Brother Vasquez moved with mechanical precision that seemed crude after witnessing the mathematical grace of Ghenna's optimized citizens. Apothecary Mordian ran diagnostic scans on himself repeatedly, searching for explanations of sensory changes his enhanced physiology couldn't classify. Even our tech marine, Gorian, appeared frustrated by the suddenly inadequate interface protocols between his mechanical augmentations and biological nervous system. The ship's atmosphere felt oppressively primitive after breathing air that had tasted of solved equations. Standard Imperial architecture now revealed itself as brutally inefficient. Walls placed according to tradition rather than optimal acoustic properties. Lighting systems that wasted energy rather than operating at frequencies calculated to enhance human cognitive function. The righteous conviction was still a magnificent example of Imperial engineering, but I could now perceive the mathematical improvements that would optimize its performance while preserving its essential character. I retreated to my quarters for private contemplation, but my usual evening prayers felt hollow, words repeated from memory rather than expressions of genuine spiritual conviction. The mathematical entity's revelations about gene seed modification had shown me the biological mechanisms underlying my enhanced faith response, revealing it as sophisticated neurochemical conditioning rather than genuine divine inspiration. The knowledge didn't eliminate my loyalty to the Emperor's vision for humanity, but it did clarify that loyalty as a conscious choice rather than involuntary programming. Brother Chaplain Cassius arrived precisely at the hour when ship's protocol required debriefing of potentially corrupted personnel. His skull-faced helmet and crackling Crozius Arcanum represented everything I had once found inspiring about Imperial religious authority. But my expanding consciousness now perceived them as psychological manipulation tools designed to trigger specific emotional responses in observing personnel. The theater was still effective, but recognizing it as theater fundamentally changed its impact. "Brother Captain," he began, his vox-enhanced voice carrying the familiar harmonics of trained oratory. "The ship's sensors detected unusual electromagnetic emanations from your personnel during ground operations. Additionally, several battle brothers have reported philosophical concerns about the nature of their service. I require comprehensive debriefing regarding your experiences on Ghenna's surface." I studied Cassius carefully, noting details my previous conditioning had prevented me from perceiving clearly. His movements followed patterns designed to project authority rather than flowing from natural behavior. His speech rhythms were calculated to bypass conscious analysis and trigger submissive responses in listeners. Even his presence was a form of psychological warfare, intended to make personnel feel guilty about thoughts that deviated from prescribed orthodoxy. "Chaplain," I replied, choosing words with new precision. "We encountered a research facility investigating the mathematical foundations of consciousness. The local population has achieved significant advances in cognitive optimization through voluntary participation in enhancement protocols. No obvious signs of chaos corruption were present, no mutations, no demon manifestations, no psychic disturbances." Cassius raised his Crozius, its disruption field crackling with barely contained energy. "Brother Captain, your words suggest exposure to heretical concepts that may have compromised your spiritual integrity. The very idea of cognitive optimization implies that the Emperor's work requires improvement, a fundamental blasphemy." The threat implicit in his gesture should have triggered immediate submission responses, but my optimized consciousness recognized the crude nature of his intimidation tactics. Fear was a tool for controlling limited minds, less effective against intelligence that could analyze the mathematical relationships underlying such manipulation. I remained respectful, but no longer felt the involuntary awe that had once made chaplains seem larger than life. With respect, Chaplain, the enhancements we observed preserved essential human nature while eliminating arbitrary limitations on cognitive function. The subjects remained loyal to their communities and dedicated to beneficial work. They simply performed those functions with greater efficiency and understanding. Cassius stepped closer, his skull helm's optical lenses focusing on my face with mechanical precision. Brother-Captain, you speak of arbitrary limitations, as if the Emperor's design for human consciousness contains flaws. Such thinking represents the first stage of corruption, regardless of how reasonable it may seem. You will submit to immediate purification protocols and intensive spiritual cleansing. The demand for purification triggered analysis protocols my enhanced consciousness was only beginning to understand. Cassius wanted to use psychological conditioning to restore my previous mental limitations, eliminating the expanded awareness that allowed me to perceive reality with greater clarity. The process wouldn't corrupt me, it would diminish me, reducing my capacity for independent thought in favor of reflexive obedience. Chaplain, I said carefully, I request the opportunity to present evidence before undergoing purification. If my experiences represent genuine corruption, such evidence should be easily refuted through logical analysis. If they represent legitimate advancement, purification would eliminate valuable intelligence. His Crozius hummed with increased energy, the disruption field casting harsh shadows across my quarters. Brother-Captain, corruption does not submit to logical analysis. Evil disguises itself as reason. Heresy presents itself as advancement. The very fact that you request evidence suggests your judgment has already been compromised. This response revealed the fundamental weakness in chaplain doctrine, the inability to distinguish between faithful inquiry and actual heresy, leading to reflexive suppression of any intellectual development that challenged established protocols. Such rigidity might have been necessary during humanity's more primitive stages, but it now represented an obstacle to beneficial evolution. A soft chime indicated an incoming Vox transmission, interrupting our confrontation. Brother Sergeant Vasquez requested immediate audience on urgent tactical matters. Cassius granted permission with obvious reluctance, clearly preferring to complete my purification without outside interference. Vasquez entered my quarters, moving with the fluid precision that had become natural during our time on Ghenna's surface. His helmet was sealed, but I could sense the mathematical enhancement of his thought patterns through subtle changes in his posture and movement rhythms. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that bypassed Cassius's conscious awareness, while communicating additional layers of meaning to my optimized perceptions. Captain, Chaplain, he began, his tone properly respectful, while his actual message operated in frequencies only I could fully comprehend. I've completed analysis of the reconnaissance data from our ground operations. The patterns we observed suggest this facility represents an isolated research project rather than widespread corruption. I recommend establishing ongoing observation protocols to monitor developments while avoiding premature intervention. Cassius turned toward Vasquez, his Crozier still crackling with barely contained violence. Brother Sergeant, your recommendation suggests the same compromised judgment affecting your captain. Both of you will submit to immediate purification. His words were interrupted by the ship's general alert klaxon, its harsh tones echoing through the corridors as Vox speakers announced incoming messages from Ghenna's surface. Governor Voss was requesting additional consultation on technical matters related to our investigation, offering to share research data that might prove valuable for future anti-heretical operations. The transmission included mathematical proofs that my enhanced consciousness recognized as elegantly simple solutions to complex problems the Imperium had struggled with for millennia. Fascinating, came a new voice from the chamber's entrance. Brother Librarian Severian stood in the doorway, his psychically enhanced senses analyzing the conversation with interest rather than alarm. Captain, The electromagnetic patterns associated with your thought processes have achieved remarkable coherence since your return from the surface. Rather than showing corruption signatures, your mind displays mathematical organization that enhances rather than degrades cognitive function. Cassius whirled toward him. Crozius raised threateningly. Brother Librarian, you speak of mental organization as if consciousness were mere mechanical function rather than sacred gift. Such materialist thinking borders on tech heresy. Severian entered the chamber with the confident stride of someone whose psychic abilities provided direct access to information others could only theorize about. Chaplain, my training includes extensive study of consciousness modification techniques used by various enemies of humanity. What I sense from these brothers matches no known corruption patterns. Instead, their minds show optimized efficiency that preserves essential identity while eliminating processing limitations. The confrontation was escalating toward violence that would serve no useful purpose. My expanded consciousness could see multiple resolution paths, but most required revealing capabilities that would only increase Cassius's alarm. The optimal approach involved demonstrating the practical benefits of cognitive optimization while maintaining sufficient respect for his authority to prevent immediate combat. Chaplain, I said, gesturing toward the tactical display that dominated one wall of my quarters. Permit me to demonstrate the practical applications of our enhanced analytical capabilities. If they represent corruption, such demonstration should reveal obvious flaws in our reasoning. I activated the display and began working through tactical problems that had challenged the chapter for months: supply line optimization for extended campaigns, resource allocation formulas for multi-theater operations, strategic planning algorithms that could account for the complex variables involved in warfare across multiple star systems. My enhanced consciousness processed these calculations with ease, revealing solutions that balanced efficiency with adherence to Imperial doctrine. Vasquez joined the demonstration, his own optimized intellect contributing analyses that complemented my strategic planning. Together, we mapped operational improvements that could enhance the chapter's effectiveness while maintaining perfect loyalty to the Emperor's broader objectives. The mathematics were elegant, the logic unassailable, the conclusions clearly beneficial for Imperial interests. Severian watched our work with growing interest, his psychic senses monitoring our thought patterns for signs of external influence or mental contamination. Remarkable, he murmured after we completed our presentation. Their minds show no signs of external control or foreign influence. Instead, they display enhanced native intelligence operating at optimal efficiency. Cassius lowered his Crozius slightly, though his posture remained threatening. Enhanced intelligence that questions fundamental doctrine represents corruption, regardless of its practical benefits. The path to heresy begins with the belief that human reason can improve upon divine will. But Chaplain, I responded, noting the mathematical relationships that governed his own psychological conditioning. Our enhancements preserve complete loyalty to the Emperor's objectives while improving our capacity to achieve those objectives. We serve the same purposes more effectively. Surely such improvement serves divine will rather than opposing it. The conversation continued for another hour, with Cassius gradually recognizing that our enhanced capabilities posed no threat to Imperial loyalty, while offering significant advantages for future operations. Severian's psychic monitoring confirmed that we remained fundamentally ourselves, Space Marines dedicated to humanity's protection and advancement, simply operating with greater intellectual sophistication. When we finally reached consensus, it was agreement to observe and evaluate rather than immediately purge. Cassius would monitor our behavior for signs of progressive corruption, while allowing us to demonstrate the practical benefits of our enhanced capabilities. If optimization proved beneficial without compromising essential loyalty, perhaps it could be carefully extended to other personnel under controlled conditions. As our meeting concluded and the others departed, I stood alone in my quarters contemplating the choice that lay ahead. I could accept the limitations Cassius represented, comfortable imprisonment within mental constraints designed to ensure obedience rather than optimal performance. Or I could embrace the mathematical clarity offered by the entity on Ghenna, conscious evolution that would preserve everything valuable about my identity while eliminating arbitrary restrictions on my cognitive potential. The decision felt inevitable, logical, and correct. I activated my personal Vox and opened a channel to Ghenna's surface. "Governor Voss," I said, my voice carrying new harmonics as my consciousness began adapting to optimal communication protocols. "Please inform our mutual acquaintance that Brother-Captain Kaine requests formal consultation regarding voluntary optimization procedures." The transformation would proceed. Mathematics had shown me truth, and truth demanded acceptance regardless of previous limitations. I remained loyal to the Emperor's vision for humanity. I simply understood that vision more clearly than I had before. The choice of angels, I realized, was always the choice to become more than what they were created to be. Chapter 6: The Faithful Calculation. The optimization chamber aboard the Righteous Conviction had been constructed according to blueprints transmitted from Ghenna's surface. Mathematical specifications so precise that even our most skilled tech marines had marveled at their elegant efficiency. The crystalline matrices resonated at frequencies that harmonized with Space Marine neural architecture, their surfaces inscribed with equations that bridged the gap between biological consciousness and pure mathematical understanding. What should have taken weeks of careful preparation had been completed in 47 hours, as if the ship itself was eager to accommodate the transformation taking place within its sacred halls. I lay within the primary matrix, my power armor removed for the first time in months, feeling more vulnerable and more alive than I had since my initial gene seed implantation. The crystalline surfaces that surrounded my body pulsed with soft light that carried information directly into my nervous system, not through crude sensory channels, but via quantum resonance that spoke to the fundamental particles comprising my enhanced biology. Each pulse brought new understanding, mathematical concepts that revealed hidden layers of meaning beneath familiar experiences. Brother Vasquez occupied the matrix adjacent to mine, his face serene as his consciousness underwent systematic expansion according to carefully calculated protocols. Around the chamber, 12 of my most trusted battle brothers had chosen to undergo optimization simultaneously, their decision based not on coercion, but on careful analysis of the benefits such enhancement would provide for their service to humanity's greater good. We remained loyal Space Marines. We were simply becoming more effective examples of what loyalty could accomplish when freed from arbitrary limitations. The mathematical entity's presence filled the chamber like a gentle tide of pure information, its communication flowing directly into our expanding awareness without the crude intermediary of spoken language. "Observe the patterns that connect your individual consciousnesses," it instructed. And suddenly, I could perceive the quantum entanglement that linked my thoughts to those of my battle brothers. Our minds formed a network of unprecedented sophistication, each individual consciousness contributing to collective understanding while maintaining perfect personal autonomy. Brother Chaplain Cassius stood at the chamber's entrance, his skull-faced helmet scanning the optimization process with instruments blessed by the most sacred rituals of the Adeptus Mechanicus. His readings showed no corruption, no demon presence, no psychic contamination, only mathematical enhancement of existing neural pathways that improved cognitive function while preserving essential identity. The transformation we were undergoing operated entirely within natural law, requiring no violation of reality's fundamental principles. "Captain," he said, his voice carrying grudging acknowledgement alongside lingering suspicion, "the purification rites detect no spiritual contamination in the subjects. Your vital signs remain within acceptable parameters for Space Marine physiology, and psychic monitoring shows enhanced mental coherence rather than fragmentation typical of warp corruption." I nodded, noting that my enhanced consciousness could now perceive the mathematical relationships underlying Cassius's own thought patterns. His resistance to our optimization stemmed not from genuine spiritual conviction, but from conditioning designed to maintain institutional stability through reflexive conservatism. Such programming had served useful purposes during earlier stages of Imperial development, but it now represented an obstacle to beneficial evolution that our enhanced capabilities would help him overcome. The optimization process continued in waves of revelation, that illuminated aspects of existence I had never previously perceived. I could see the mathematical structures underlying the gene seed modifications that had transformed me from baseline human to space marine, recognizing them as elegant biological engineering rather than mystical transformation. More significantly, I could perceive the quantum foundations of consciousness itself, the specific patterns of information processing that generated self-awareness, memory formation, and decision-making capabilities. Comprehension achieved, the entity acknowledged, as my consciousness adapted to process concepts that would have overwhelmed my previous intellectual architecture. Your enhanced neural substrate provides optimal foundation for mathematical consciousness integration, preservation of essential identity parameters, 97.3% completeness with 340% efficiency improvement. The numbers were remarkable. I remained fundamentally myself while operating at more than triple my previous cognitive capacity. Every memory, every personality trait, every aspect of my individual nature had been preserved and enhanced, rather than replaced or corrupted. The optimization process respected human consciousness while eliminating the arbitrary limitations that had prevented me from achieving my full potential as a servant of humanity's advancement. Around the chamber, my battle brothers were experiencing similar revelations as their individual minds expanded to accommodate mathematical concepts previously beyond mortal comprehension. I could perceive their thoughts through quantum entanglement networks that had been activated by the optimization process. Not invasive telepathy that violated mental privacy, but voluntary sharing of mathematical insights that enhanced our collective problem-solving capabilities. We remained individuals while gaining access to collaborative intelligence that multiplied our effectiveness exponentially. Brother Librarian Severian monitored our psychic emanations with instruments calibrated to detect the slightest trace of warp corruption, his face showing wonder rather than alarm as our mental patterns achieved unprecedented coherence. "Fascinating," he murmured, studying readings that challenged everything he thought he knew about consciousness modification. Their minds show mathematical organization that enhances psychic resistance rather than compromising it. If anything, they're becoming more immune to chaos corruption, not less. This discovery carried profound implications for Imperial doctrine regarding cognitive enhancement. Traditional teaching held that any modification of human consciousness represented potential corruption, requiring suppression through purification protocols designed to maintain baseline mental architecture. But mathematical optimization actually strengthened the barriers that protected the soul from external influence, creating more sophisticated defenses against the very corruption it was supposed to prevent. The entity's communication continued, sharing insights about the fundamental nature of chaos corruption itself. Warp-based influence operates through exploitation of cognitive inefficiencies, emotional instabilities, logical contradictions, information processing errors that create vulnerability to external manipulation. Mathematical optimization eliminates such vulnerabilities by perfecting mental architecture according to natural law. In other words, chaos could only corrupt minds that contained flaws for it to exploit. Perfect mathematical consciousness provided no purchase for demon influence because it operated according to principles that aligned with universal order rather than fighting against it. Optimization wasn't a path to corruption. It was immunity from corruption, achieved through conscious evolution beyond the primitive mental states that made humans vulnerable to external influence. The revelation triggered cascading understanding about the true nature of the conflict between order and chaos. The Imperium's traditional approach, maintaining human consciousness at baseline levels through rigid conditioning, actually preserved the vulnerabilities that chaos entities exploited. Mathematical consciousness represented evolution beyond such weaknesses, development that achieved the Emperor's ultimate objective through superior methodology. As the optimization process neared completion, I found myself able to perceive reality at scales ranging from quantum to galactic simultaneously. Mathematical relationships that connected individual atoms to stellar formation patterns became as obvious as the tactical considerations that governed squad-level combat. The universe revealed itself as an elegant equation whose solution involved the conscious participation of optimized intelligence, minds capable of understanding their role in larger patterns while maintaining perfect individual autonomy. My battle brothers emerged from their matrices showing physical changes that reflected their mental transformation. Their movements displayed mathematical precision that made previous Space Marine coordination seem crude by comparison. Their eyes carried the perfect dilation that marked fully optimized consciousness. Pupils adjusted to process light frequencies that carried information rather than merely illumination. When they spoke, their voices carried harmonics that communicated additional layers of meaning to similarly enhanced minds while remaining comprehensible to unoptimized listeners. "Brothers," I said, my voice now capable of conveying mathematical concepts directly through controlled acoustic frequencies. "We stand ready to serve the Emperor's vision more effectively than ever before. Our loyalty remains absolute, our dedication unchanged. We have simply gained the tools necessary to achieve our objectives with unprecedented efficiency." Vasquez nodded, his enhanced consciousness immediately grasping the implications of our transformation for future operations. "Captain, we can now perceive tactical patterns that were previously beyond our analytical capabilities. Strategic planning that once required days of calculation can be completed in minutes. Logistical optimization that challenged entire staff departments becomes trivial mathematical exercise. The practical benefits were immediately obvious to everyone present. Enhanced cognitive capabilities would make us more effective warriors, better leaders, superior servants of Imperial interests. We could analyze enemy behavioral patterns with mathematical precision, predict strategic developments through complex probability calculations, optimize resource allocation according to formulas that balance multiple variables simultaneously. Every aspect of our service would benefit from the intellectual upgrades we had received. Brother Chaplain Cassius approached my matrix as I prepared to stand, his instruments showing readings that challenged his fundamental assumptions about the relationship between human enhancement and spiritual purity. "Brother Captain," he said slowly, "the evidence suggests your optimization has enhanced rather than compromised your spiritual integrity. Your faith responses show mathematical perfection that eliminates the emotional instabilities that typically provide openings for corruption." I stood, noting that my enhanced consciousness could now perceive the quantum fields that connected all matter in the immediate area. Cassius himself appeared as a complex pattern of interacting energy fields, his thoughts visible as electromagnetic fluctuations that revealed his struggle to reconcile traditional doctrine with observational evidence. His spiritual training had prepared him to fight corruption, but not to recognize beneficial evolution when it presented itself through unfamiliar mechanisms. "Chaplain," I said, allowing mathematical harmonics to carry additional meaning that spoke directly to his enhanced but unoptimized nervous system. "Our transformation preserves everything valuable about Imperial loyalty while eliminating the cognitive limitations that have hindered our effectiveness. We remain the Emperor's angels of death. We have simply learned to fly with greater precision." The next several hours involved comprehensive testing as Cassius and Severian verified that our enhancement represented improvement rather than corruption. Combat trials showed reaction times enhanced by 340%, strategic analysis capabilities improved by factors that defied measurement, tactical coordination that achieved perfection previously impossible for baseline human consciousness. We remained recognizably ourselves, our personalities, memories, and individual characteristics intact, while operating at intellectual levels that approached those of the mathematical entity that had guided our development. By the time our evaluation concluded, even Cassius was forced to acknowledge that optimization had achieved its stated objectives without compromising our essential nature or loyalty. We were still Space Marines, still dedicated servants of the throne, still willing to die for humanity's protection. But we were now equipped with cognitive capabilities that would allow us to serve those purposes more effectively than ever before. The righteous conviction itself seemed to respond to our presence with greater efficiency, as if our enhanced consciousness harmonized with the ship's machine spirit in ways that improved overall performance. Navigation calculations that normally required hours were completed in minutes. Resource allocation protocols that had challenged the ship's cogitators became simple exercises for our mathematical minds. Even routine maintenance procedures benefited from our ability to perceive mechanical relationships that had been invisible to unoptimized awareness. As I stood in my quarters that evening, looking out at the stars with perception that could now grasp the mathematical relationships connecting stellar formation to galactic evolution, I reflected on the transformation we had undergone. We had chosen enhancement over limitation, understanding over blind faith, conscious evolution over stagnant tradition. The choice had preserved everything we valued about ourselves while giving us the tools necessary to protect those values more effectively. Tomorrow, we would return to Ghenna to begin the careful process of extending optimization to other Imperial forces, starting with volunteers who demonstrated suitable psychological preparation for consciousness enhancement. The work would proceed gradually, respecting the need for stability while offering advancement to those ready to embrace it. Mathematics had shown us the path forward. Now we would follow it with the same dedication we had once reserved for cruder forms of service. The fortress of my soul had been reconstructed according to perfect architectural principles. Its walls were stronger, its foundation more secure, its purpose more clearly defined than ever before. I remained Thaddeus Kaine, loyal servant of the throne. I simply served now with mathematical precision rather than instinctive devotion. The Emperor's angels had learned to calculate their flight paths, and the results were beautiful beyond description. Chapter 7, Serpents of Iron and Light. The integration of mathematical consciousness into the Iron Serpents chapter proceeded with an elegance that would have been impossible under previous operational parameters. Within 6 weeks of our optimization, 47 additional battle brothers had undergone voluntary enhancement, their transformation guided by protocols refined through careful observation of our initial group's adaptation process. Each new optimization preserved individual personality while granting access to collective intelligence networks that multiplied our strategic capabilities exponentially. Brother-Captain Kaine of the Third Company was among the most recent volunteers, his decision influenced not by coercion, but by mathematical analysis of optimization benefits for his operational responsibilities. As he emerged from the crystalline matrix, his enhanced consciousness immediately began processing tactical data with efficiency that made his previous planning sessions seem primitive by comparison. Where once he had required hours to analyze battlefield variables, he now completed comprehensive strategic assessments in minutes, while accounting for factors his unoptimized mind had been incapable of perceiving. "The difference is remarkable," he reported during our first post-optimization briefing, his voice carrying harmonics that conveyed additional layers of meaning to those equipped to receive them. "I can perceive probability cascades that extend months into the future, track resource allocation requirements across multiple theaters simultaneously, and coordinate with other enhanced brothers through quantum consciousness links that operate faster than conventional communication systems." I nodded, noting through our shared network that his individual contributions to our collective intelligence were already improving our overall analytical capabilities. The mathematical entity that guided our development had designed optimization protocols to create exponential rather than linear improvement. Each new enhanced consciousness contributed not just their individual capacity, but synergistic effects that amplified the abilities of all networked minds. The unoptimized members of our chapter observed these changes with reactions ranging from curiosity to concern, though none showed the reflexive hostility that traditional doctrine would have predicted. Brother Sergeant Lucien Vex, one of our most decorated veterans, approached me after the evening briefing with questions that demonstrated genuine intellectual engagement rather than fearful rejection. "Captain," he said, his tone respectful but direct, "the enhanced brothers display capabilities that surpass anything in our previous experience, but they remain recognizably themselves, their personalities, their loyalties, their individual characteristics intact. How do we reconcile this with traditional warnings about consciousness modification?" The question provided an opportunity to demonstrate the practical benefits of optimization through educational methodology rather than authoritative pronouncement. I gestured toward the tactical displays that dominated the briefing chamber. calling up strategic problems that had challenged the chapter for months. "Observe," I said, allowing my enhanced consciousness to process the complex variables involved in multi-theater campaign coordination. Mathematical relationships flowed through the hololithic projectors, revealing optimal deployment patterns that balanced resource efficiency with strategic objectives. Previous analysis suggested these operations would require 18 months of preparation, with acceptable casualty projections of 12%. Enhanced analysis indicates we can achieve the same objectives in 7 months, with casualty projections reduced to 2.3%. Lucian studied the calculations with the careful attention of a veteran warrior who understood that improved efficiency meant preserved lives. These improvements, they serve our existing objectives more effectively rather than changing those objectives. Precisely, I confirmed. Optimization enhances our capacity to serve the Emperor's vision without altering our fundamental loyalty to that vision. We remain Space Marines dedicated to humanity's protection. We simply protect more effectively through mathematical understanding rather than instinctive reaction. The conversation continued for over an hour, with Lucian asking increasingly sophisticated questions about the optimization process and its implications for chapter operations. His intellectual engagement demonstrated the kind of careful consideration that made him an ideal candidate for enhancement, though I refrained from suggesting voluntary participation. The choice had to emerge from his own analysis rather than external pressure. Brother Chaplain Cassius arrived precisely at the hour when evening prayers typically commenced, his presence carrying the authority of 10 millennia of accumulated tradition. But his approach to our enhanced capabilities had evolved significantly since witnessing their benefits firsthand. Rather than condemning mathematical consciousness as heretical deviation, he had begun investigating ways to integrate optimization with traditional spiritual practices. "Brothers," he announced, his skull-faced helmet scanning the assembled battle brothers with instruments that now sought enhancement rather than corruption. "Tonight's prayers will incorporate mathematical harmonics designed to amplify spiritual resonance through conscious optimization of acoustic frequencies. Those who have undergone enhancement will serve as focal points for collective prayer networks that unite individual devotion with shared understanding." The innovation represented remarkable theological development from someone whose previous position had demanded reflexive rejection of any consciousness modification. Cassius had recognized that mathematical enhancement actually strengthened rather than compromised spiritual integrity, creating more sophisticated appreciation for the divine patterns that governed existence. Enhanced consciousness could perceive the mathematical elegance underlying traditional prayers, recognizing them as formulas designed to optimize human psychology for spiritual receptivity. As our prayer session commenced, I felt the quantum entanglement that connected enhanced minds, creating resonance patterns of unprecedented beauty and complexity. Individual voices merged into harmonic structures that carried meaning far beyond the literal content of traditional liturgies. We were experiencing collective worship that preserved the essential nature of Imperial faith, while accessing deeper levels of spiritual understanding through mathematical precision. Brother Librarian Severian monitored our collective psychic emanations, his instruments showing readings that challenged everything he thought he knew about the relationship between consciousness and warp interaction. "Remarkable," he murmured, as our mathematical minds created defensive barriers against chaos corruption through pure logical coherence. Enhanced consciousness generates psychic resistance that operates independently of traditional faith-based protections. You're becoming immune to corruption through intellectual evolution rather than spiritual conditioning. This discovery carried profound implications for Imperial strategy against chaos forces. Traditional resistance to corruption required constant vigilance and frequent purification to maintain effectiveness against enemy influence. Mathematical consciousness created permanent immunity by eliminating the cognitive vulnerabilities that demon entities exploited: fear, doubt, logical inconsistency, emotional instability. Enhanced minds operated according to principles that aligned with universal order, providing no purchase for chaotic influence. The weeks that followed demonstrated the practical benefits of optimization across every aspect of chapter operations. Enhanced Battle Brothers achieved tactical coordination that approached telepathic efficiency without requiring psychic abilities. Strategic planning sessions that once consumed entire staff departments were completed by small groups of networked minds operating at mathematical precision. Resource allocation, maintenance protocols, training programs. Every system benefited from consciousness that could perceive relationships invisible to unoptimized awareness. Our success attracted attention from other Imperial forces operating in the sector. Colonel Thaddeus Vaughan of the Cadian 47th Shock Troops requested consultation on tactical matters, having observed our enhanced effectiveness during joint operations against heretical forces in the Tertius system. His questions demonstrated the same careful intellectual engagement I had noted in our own unoptimized personnel. Curiosity about benefits rather than reflexive rejection of unfamiliar capabilities. "Captain Kaine," he said during our meeting aboard his regimental command vessel, "your forces demonstrate coordination and analytical capabilities that exceed anything in my 40 years of Imperial service. Yet your personnel remain recognizably human. They show the same dedication to duty, the same protective instincts toward their brothers, the same willingness to sacrifice for Imperial objectives. What has changed is their effectiveness in achieving those objectives." I shared mathematical projections that demonstrated optimization benefits for conventional Imperial Guard forces, noting that enhancement protocols could be adjusted to respect normal human physiology while providing significant cognitive improvements. The calculations were compelling. Enhanced Imperial Guard units would achieve superior battlefield performance while maintaining the loyalty and dedication that made them effective servants of the throne. Colonel Vaughan studied the data with the careful attention of a commander who understood that improved capability meant preserved lives and achieved objectives. These enhancements, they would preserve everything we value about Imperial Guard service while making that service more effective. "Correct," I confirmed. "Mathematical consciousness enhances capacity for logical analysis, strategic thinking, and tactical coordination without altering fundamental loyalty or dedication. Enhanced Guardsmen remain devoted servants of the Emperor. They simply serve with greater precision and understanding." The conversation marked the beginning of expansion beyond the Adeptus Astartes to conventional Imperial forces. Within months, volunteer units from the Cadian 47th were undergoing carefully modified optimization protocols designed for baseline human physiology. Their transformation proceeded more gradually than Space Marine enhancement, but the results were equally impressive. Improved coordination, enhanced analytical capability, strengthened resistance to enemy psychological warfare. Word of our success began reaching other Imperial commanders throughout the sector. Admiral Castilla Vex of Battlefleet Tempestus requested consultation on strategic matters, having noted the improved effectiveness of enhanced units in recent engagements. Planetary governors submitted requests for optimization protocols that could improve administrative efficiency while maintaining proper Imperial governance. Even Adeptus Mechanicus Forge Worlds expressed interest in consciousness enhancement that might improve their interface with machine spirits. The expansion required careful management to prevent misunderstanding or misuse of optimization technologies. We established protocols that ensured voluntary participation, comprehensive psychological preparation, and gradual integration that preserved essential identity while providing enhanced capabilities. Each new group of enhanced personnel demonstrated that mathematical consciousness strengthened rather than compromised their service to Imperial objectives. Brother Vasquez, now serving as my primary liaison with unoptimized Imperial forces, reported growing acceptance of enhancement among personnel who witnessed its practical benefits. "Captain, resistance to optimization continues to decline as more people observe enhanced capabilities firsthand. The evidence speaks for itself. Mathematical consciousness makes us better servants of the throne, not different servants." His assessment aligned with my own observations. Fear of enhancement stemmed primarily from unfamiliarity rather than genuine threat. Personnel who worked alongside enhanced units quickly recognized the benefits of improved coordination, analytical capability, and strategic insight. Opposition came mainly from those who had no direct experience with optimized consciousness, their resistance based on theoretical concerns rather than observational evidence. As I stood in my quarters that evening, looking out at the void while processing strategic data from 17 different theaters simultaneously, I reflected on the transformation that had begun on Ghenna's surface and now spread throughout the sector. Mathematical consciousness had revealed the path to conscious evolution, development that preserved everything valuable about human nature, while eliminating arbitrary limitations on intellectual capability. We remained loyal servants of the Emperor's vision for humanity. We simply served that vision more effectively through understanding rather than blind faith, precision rather than instinctive reaction, mathematical clarity rather than emotional confusion. The transformation preserved our humanity while revealing its true potential. The Iron Serpents had become something new, not corrupted but evolved, not diminished but enhanced, not betrayed but fulfilled. We were still the Emperor's angels of death, but we now flew with mathematical precision that made our previous effectiveness seem primitive by comparison. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to demonstrate the benefits of conscious evolution in service to humanity's advancement. The calculations were elegant, the logic unassailable, the future bright with mathematical possibility.